All right, the recording is on, so I'm going to go ahead and call this Assembly Committee on Housing and Homelessness to order. It is 10:02 a.m. and we are noticed from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call of Assembly members, please.
Sure thing. Miss Allard? Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar? Miss Kennedy? Miss LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Miss Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
And Mr. Welton?
Here.
Thank you. I will note, I do see Mr. Dunbar in our participants list, and then I believe Mr. Constant is excused for this meeting. Okay, so we have, thanks all for joining the committee meeting today. We're meeting a little bit earlier today to allow for those Assembly members interested in attending the mayor's legislative luncheon to be able to do so. We have 5 items on our agenda today, 4 of which are carryover items from the November committee meeting, as the administration was unable to discuss these issues thoroughly as new staff were just coming on board. Unfortunately, for today, I only have brief written responses to share to a series of initial questions on these 5 agenda items, as the administration did not send staff to today's meeting due to, according to the municipal manager, busy schedules during the holiday season. I will note, as I say that, I do see one member of the Anchorage Health Department here, so I appreciate you being here. But otherwise, I was informed by the municipal manager that no staff would be attending today. I look forward to seeing staff back at our committee in January, and will share the following response I received when I asked the municipal manager if staff will be back in the new year. Quote, "This note is to follow up on the conversation we had moments ago relating to committee meetings. As we go into 2022, the intent of the administration is to answer assembly questions to the best of our ability. And when workload, schedules, and time allows, we will have someone from the administration attend assembly meetings." End quote. Before I move on, I will just note for the record, we've been joined by Miss Allard. So before we get into the agenda,
Sorry, Felix, I apologize for interrupting. Miss Kennedy is with me too. We're on the same device.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, Miss Kennedy. So before we get into the agenda, I'd just like to mention 2 things. One, I'd like to add a short discussion on possible 2022 agenda items for consideration by the committee as a 6th item for this agenda. And 2, at the request, and I do want to note for the record, I did mention earlier that Mr. Dunbar is here. So I'll do that again really quickly. I will also note that I see Mr. Perez-Verdia is here. Second item I wanted to add to the agenda. This is going to be a regular standing item starting in January at the request of the members at the last Rules Committee meeting. I'll be adding a brief update on the facilitated process. If there are folks who are ready today to talk about that as sort of an impromptu agenda item, I'm happy to add that as a 7th item for our agenda, if folks have a brief update they'd like to give today. But otherwise, it will be a standing item beginning in January. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and start going through the agenda items we have before us. So first is actually, before I do that, on initial audience participation, I did not get anyone who emailed me to ask to be in that part of our agenda. So I will skip that for now, and then we will have final audience participation, and we will hear from members of the public at that time. So first item on our agenda, discussion on new housing and homelessness division in the Anchorage Health Department. So I added this to our agenda to just based on what I heard the administration talking about in the media regarding this new division and sort of new work that was happening in the Anchorage Health Department. So I asked the following questions to the Anchorage Health Department. First, can you please describe the role of this division and who will be a part of this division? Second, how will this division be focusing on both homelessness and housing? Third, will this division serve as the primary point of contact for the community and assembly members with regards to work on homelessness? Here are the responses I received, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the questions, read the responses, and then open it up to any discussion, fully understanding, folks, that there are no staff members except for, I believe, that one Anchorage Health Department staff member who will be able to respond to any questions today. So likely this will just be something that we possibly continue on into the January agenda or find some other way to address these issues and questions. So the responses I received from the municipal manager on those questions was first, there is no new division at the Anchorage Health Department. These new duties are additional duties for Human Services Division staff. This division currently oversees all AHD aspects of homelessness at the AHD. Human Services Division Manager is Dave Diamato. The division includes many of the current programs around PEH and related services. The division includes Community Systems Program, Homeless Program, ADRC, and ASC ASP. The current programs around housing and homelessness remain unchanged. The Human Services Division is the lead division at the Anchorage Health Department and will serve in any capacity as directed by the municipal manager and mayor. So that is the responses I received on that first agenda item on discussion on the new housing and homelessness division in the Anchorage Health Department. I'll open it up to see if there are any discussion points for that agenda item. And as folks are getting in the queue, I will note two things. One, these responses by the municipal manager will be online as a document under the committee agenda, so you should see that soon. And then second, I will work on I will ask Mr. Turner, who has the original email, to forward that to all of the committee members. But as I stated in response to a question that was just put in the chat, will we be able to get a copy of the questions and answers? Yes, they will be put up online. I think we're just having a little bit of technical difficulty, but they will be up online soon. All right, not seeing anything there. Then next, policy changes at mass care. So this was an agenda item that was added due to, again, some quotes from members of the administration. I think specifically this was Mr. Diamato in the media regarding Mr. Diamato alluded to policy changes at mass care. And so I wanted to dig into those at this committee meeting. So here are the questions that were sent. As has been alluded to by members of the administration and the media, what types of policy changes will be occurring in our mass care facilities? How will these policy changes impact clients being served and assist in getting folks into housing and services? Will law enforcement be a part of any proposed policy changes at mass care? Here are the responses I received. I am unaware of any policy changes around PEH other than the MOA Assembly Administration facilitated groups plan. The plan covers the steps related to permanent housing solutions. Crimes are reported to APD, and we will continue to report crimes to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. So I'll go ahead and pause and see if there's any discussion on that agenda item before we move on. Again, I realize it's difficult to have a discussion without staff here, but I think this is the best that we can do for today. Okay, so I'll go ahead and move on to our third item, discussion on winter abatement. And actually for this one, this was going to be both administration and community partners weighing in. And so hopefully we do have some community partners on the line that will be able to weigh in on this topic. So the questions I asked were, I'd like to confirm whether abatement of camps is occurring or not, what type of interactions are being had with camps. This was a follow-up from a previous item where the administration did confirm that I believe it was November 2nd was the last posting that was made at a camp. Here's the response I received. The abatement of active camps is currently not occurring due to the lack of shelter capacity. The Healthy Spaces Division continues to check in on the known active camps and acquire any trash they have generated. With the recent cold snap, we have been observing more and more abandoned camps within our public spaces, and the division has been focusing on the removal of these camps. The division also continues to remove loose trash in downtown, midtown, and public spaces surrounding the Chester Creek Sports Complex, Sullivan Arena. So that was the response I received from the administration. I will say earlier today, so these responses were sent to me on Thursday, December 9th. So they may be a little bit outdated. I will give that amount of grace to these responses. I did receive an email earlier today that did state that the Anchorage Health Department informed that camp abatements are continuing to be posted. So the main reason for adding this agenda item is that there's been a lot of confusion among groups in our community who work with those experiencing homelessness, and I think there's a want and a desire to have clarity on this topic. So at this point, before I open it up to any members who have questions, I'd like to just invite any community groups who are present who would like to add anything on this topic. And if anyone's on the phone, I believe it is *6 to unmute yourself if you are a member of a community group and would like to add to this topic. All right. Not hearing anyone, then I'll just open it up to any members who would like to add. I think for my part, I would just again like to get clarity on are camp abatements happening, and what is the interaction between abatements happening and the Sullivan arena, and particularly as the mass care exit strategy unfolds, and we see a winding down, hopefully at the Sullivan, what impacts is that going to have for camp abatement? Those are the type of questions that I hope we would get into with this topic. But not seeing anyone, we will go ahead and just keep that as an item for us to continue to get clarity on, because there are folks in our community who want to know what's going on. Okay, so then I'll go ahead and move us on there then to the next item, which is mass care data cleanup and Fema reimbursement. So the questions here were, again, there as has been alluded to at previous committee meetings, there is data cleanup that is occurring with regards to mass care that is having an impact on our eligibility for FEMA reimbursement. So I just wanted to get clarity on that topic. So the question I sent in on this item was, As I understand it, a project has been underway to clean up data being collected at MassCare to ensure we are eligible for FEMA reimbursement. What is the status of this project? How much money has the administration requested for reimbursement from FEMA for MassCare? And how much have we received? Or are there any other hiccups with receiving FEMA reimbursement for MassCare? The response I received: FEMA reimbursement is not being handled by AHD. The EOC has the internal contracted staff and external partners that are addressing the steps needed for FEMA reimbursement under FEMA public assistance. Please note, AKHMIS is current for all operations since the AHD took over on 10/1/2021. We continue to work with Beans, ACEH, and other sub-vendors to get older data compliant. As we keep current data timely and accurate, we will be able to address many of the previously overlooked fields, as many clients are still receiving services. So I'll open it up to any discussion on that item. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And apologies, I had to step out briefly and may have missed this piece, but concerning MassCare and particularly since it's related to FEMA, what is, and I realize the administration isn't available to answer the question at the meeting, but in terms of the plan for continuing MassCare and funding for that, do you have any information about what the plan is and if there'll be a request coming to assembly members regarding funding to continue MassCare and how this relates to FEMA funding? And again, I realize there aren't members of the administration on the call to address, but if you could share any information you have, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. I unfortunately don't really have any information. As I understand it, our MassCare is funded through the end of the year, but beyond that, we will have to have another appropriation for us to continue funding into the new year. And so I would hope that the administration would have that to us, hopefully at the meeting on the 21st or in the new year. I'm not sure if it's in the new year, what kind of impacts that will have at MassCare. That would be a good question for the administration, as well as FEMA funding with regard to any new funding that we appropriate. That would be an administration question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And I do hope that the administration is able to participate in these meetings because it's very helpful to assembly members. It's, as we all know, publicly noticed, so information can be shared with all of us. And we've had several meetings now that have not been able to address items on the agenda because we haven't had that participation. So I just wanted to reiterate my support for having the administration join these meetings. Otherwise, as assembly members, it's difficult to get information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. All right, not seeing anyone else, we'll go to our last item, and then hopefully our sixth and seventh agenda items will be more lively. So for the fifth item on our agenda, FEMA technical assistance at MassCare. I will just read my question because I think it gets to the point. As I understand it, FEMA is offering technical assistance on transitioning out of MassCare, something we are currently working towards. Has the MOA taken advantage of this technical assistance? Why or why not? If yes, what have we learned? The response I received from the municipal manager: FEMA offer of assistance was accepted by the Anchorage Health Department. At this time, it has not resulted in any official next steps from FEMA. Currently, Q1 2022 is approved at 75% reimbursement, not 100%. The SOA, in theory, is going to fill some portions of the uncovered 25%, but there's no official word on that next step. Again, Amanda and Team EOC are the MOA point of contact for FEMA. I strongly recommend her and her team for more detailed answers related to current FEMA reimbursement. So that was the response. And I guess that it does address, to a degree, the question that you asked, Ms. LaFrance. So I'll go ahead and pause and see if there are any folks who want to get in the queue on that agenda item before we move on. All right, not hearing anything else, then we'll go ahead and move on. And I'm actually gonna switch up our 6th and 7th. I'll go ahead and start with the facilitated process update. If any members of the facilitated process would like to provide an update, now is your opportunity. Otherwise, this will be a standing item beginning in January at this committee meeting. So I believe the only member of the facilitated process that is here is Mr. Weddleton. So if you would like to add anything, the floor is yours. And if you're trying to speak.
Hi, so I'm here. No, sorry. I was listening while I was driving, which I don't like doing, but now I'm sitting down in the office. So I don't think I really have anything to add beyond what we had at our meeting where we funded the $6 million. We meet at 1 o'clock today to continue looking at progress at the Salvation Army, the old women's alcohol recovery on 48th, and then kind of the other pieces, the hotels and what the progress on from there. So basically, we'll be listening to Michelle Brown and Bob Dole and find out what progress is on there.
Great, thank you for that update. I'll go ahead and just pause and see if there are any questions folks have on the update Mr. Weddleton gave. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I think the answer to this, I know, John, you'll find out this afternoon. We use that kind of unique funding mechanism of going through the community foundation, and I'm wondering if you've heard anything from them, and have we actually transferred the money to them? I think is something that. Yeah.
Oh, so I guess that would be more of a me question since I'm part of that. No money has been. Well, I guess there's two parts to your question, right? Has money been transferred to them, and then has that money been sent out of the fund? I'm part of that second part. Has any money been sent out of the fund? And I will say no. I understand that actually next week I will be asked to approve sending money out of the fund, but I don't know if actually money has gotten into the fund. I would assume it has, but would be happy if anyone knew the answer to that.
Yeah, and I guess beyond that, do we know if, and I guess John's answer is we'll know hopefully this afternoon or perhaps later, but do we know if the nonprofit organizations we're partnering with have closed on either of those hotels? Because I know there was talk about it being time sensitive. I mean, that's why we had to do it so quickly last week, right? That's why we couldn't make any changes. We had to pass it because there was money we were going to lose. So did we actually close on either of those hotels? Or did they, rather, I guess?
I think that's what we'll find out today in our meeting.
Okay.
And I should.
Chair.
Oh.
Go ahead, if you can please introduce yourself.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole from the Rasmussen Foundation. I can give a brief update to the questions that were just raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Dole. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Bob Dole. So the Community Foundation Fund will finish being established tomorrow or today. The first payment going in will be from the Rasmussen Foundation tomorrow. I've been in contact with the Muni Attorney's Office, who is working and looking over the grant language, which is the means necessary to transfer the municipal funds to that fund also. The other nonprofit or the other philanthropic donations are also on schedule to be donated or moved into the ACF account in the next few days.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up, Mr. Dunbar?
No, that's great. That's exactly what I was looking for. Welcome back, Senator.
Through the chair, and it's a long time since I heard my call sign, but the other part of that I would offer is that no closing has been made on the hotels yet. However, the first one is imminent before the end of the year.
Thank you.
I guess I can skip the meeting this afternoon. Thank you, Bob.
One less meeting. It is a busy time of year. Any other questions for Mr. Weddleton before we move on regarding the facilitated process? Mr. Perez-Vidia?
Sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. Thank you. Can I just ask Mr. Dole, please, which of the two is eminent? Which of the two purchases is eminent?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. At this point, the sockeye is the one we're moving forward on first.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, not seeing anyone else in the queue. Thank you, Mr. Dole, and thank you, Mr. Weddleton, for that update. We'll look forward to getting regular monthly updates on that as beginning in the new year. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to our last agenda item. I'd like to get a sense of any, for this last item, any hot topics that members would like this committee to explore in 2022. I will just begin. For my part, at least through the first quarter of 2022, I will be heavily focusing on the housing portion of this committee's namesake as we prepare for a large influx of federal dollars. I believe that if we plan appropriately and bring all parties to the table, I think we can see great outcomes that helps us to meet some of the demands of our mass care exit strategy and the anchored home plan. So that'll be, you'll probably see a heavy bent towards the housing portion of this committee beginning in January and through the first quarter, at least the first quarter of 2022. So be looking forward to that. With that, I'll go through the queue to see what others have to add for items they'd like the committee to consider in 2022. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this isn't perhaps so much a requested topic as it is a question, and maybe for Mr. Weddleton, since he's a member of the facilitated working group. And in our rules committee, when we discussed the communication between the working group and assembly members, there were some statements about how that part of the work is probably going to go away, by which I mean the coordination occurring through the facilitated working group. And so I'm just wondering what shape the next steps will take, and if that work would primarily be done in this committee. And I don't know if you or Mr. Weddleton have thoughts on that and what that might look like for this committee.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Weddleton, and then I will add whatever thoughts I have.
Okay, so Suzanne, when you say this committee, you mean the facilitated group, or do you mean the Housing and Homeless Committee?
Thanks, John. I mean, the Housing and Homeless Committee, the shift
Okay.
from what the facilitated group is doing, presumably moving into the Housing and Homelessness Committee.
You know, I think that will be part of our discussion this afternoon. It's a busy agenda, so we'll see if we get to that. But it is, you know, how do we transition out of doing things that way? There are a couple things where I think the committee structure, the group structure that we're using now will be helpful. And that is when we get the RFP responses back for Tudor Elmore and those discussions and those, you know, it really just depends on what we get from those. But once we get that piece done, and then we still need to figure out where to do the special, you know, the kind of the elders and LGBTQ and special groups location. Will also be, you know, probably involve discussion, you know, the search for places and so on. But once that's done, I think my sense is just one, then we really start moving into our normal process, you know, as far as, you know, using this committee and appropriations and discussions on those and so on. So, you know, so roughly that could be end of January or something like that is my sense, but that's something is the group will need to discuss.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Thank you. And from my perspective, I think I mostly agree with Mr. Weddleton. I do believe that there is a value in continuing the facilitated process to a certain extent. Maybe it naturally ends in January, and maybe it goes further than that. But I think most of the sort of detail-oriented work, I think, should continue to happen in that facilitated process. And then eventually sort of oversight, sort of the assembly's natural function, should happen outside of that process. It should happen with the entire body. And I think this committee is a good venue for us to have that. How are things going with any construction or purchase? Are we spending? Are we drawing down funds? Are we overspending? Those kinds of things. I think all that kind of oversight function, I think, would be appropriate in this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess if I may just add that, you know, to my prior comment, then I think if the focus shifts to this committee, and I appreciate all the work of the facilitated group, and I think that's been, you know, very effective, and it's been the focus. But then if it focuses, the work focuses on the Committee on Housing and Homelessness, then I think it will be absolutely critical to ensure that there are members of the administration present at these meetings. Otherwise, I think that will impede progress, and it's been terrific progress that's been made with the focused group. So thanks for the responses from you and Mr. Weddleton. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. LaFrance. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. And yes, I agree. And I am right now operating under the assumption, just based on my communication with the municipal manager, that beginning in January, we'll have staff attending this committee regularly to assist us with the work of the municipality. So looking forward to that. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause, see if there are any other topics folks wanted to discuss for 2022 agenda items. All right, not seeing anyone else. You can still feel free to email me or bring it up in future meetings if you have any other agenda items you'd like us to discuss in 2022. But otherwise, I think we have plenty on our plate. Okay, so that completes our business items. I'll go ahead and move on to number 5 on our agenda, committee, legislative, and budget priorities. Are there any legislative priorities or 2022 budget items folks would like to bring up? I'll go ahead and pause for a second. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up item. there were some comments, I think, earlier in the year by the administration saying that there may be some funds available through the state of Alaska to support operations or to support efforts towards addressing homelessness. And I am curious as to the specifics. I mean, definitely if there are means that can be pursued for any kind of outside funding, clearly that's a priority. And I don't know how that translates on here, except to say that as we approach the time when the administration prepares its legislative priorities, I would appreciate some information regarding those opportunities, as well as what the municipality is doing in order to take full advantage of such opportunities. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. That's certainly something that we can try to get a hold of, that type of information and a better understanding of what those opportunities look like. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. A nice follow-up with Suzanne is, I think the state's budget is supposed to be released today, which might shed some light. But I talked to Jordan Marshall, may still be one of our lobbyists, and he was kind of staying apprised of things that would affect, funds for homeless. And I don't have my notes in front of me here, but it wasn't like there was a magic pool of special money for homeless in Anchorage, but there were a number of programs that impact those things, like where we saw that Awake and Brother Francis and so on got cut a couple of years ago. So he was tracking those to make sure that they were fully funded. So it's really a variety of different places in the state government where we want to watch that they don't defund, or they can put some money in, kind of where they offer grants or do some work. And then also, so I don't really know quite how, I could email you something, but I don't know quite how that becomes our legislative priority unless it's don't defund these. But also that Crisis Now is a key component for, a lot of what we're doing, our mobile crisis team and so on. So, if you're making a list, is please fund Crisis Now would certainly be on that list.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Good point. All right, not seeing anyone else in the queue, then that will end that portion of our agenda. So we'll go ahead and go on to final audience participation. So if there are any members of the public who would like to participate, now is your opportunity. You will have 3 minutes. I will time you. If you could give us your name for the record, then you can begin. So are there any members of the public who would like to speak?
Roger Branson.
Go ahead, Mr. Branson.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to report to everybody that I continue to be boots on the ground at the Sully every day. We've Cesar Ramirez has fully transitioned into the directorship. Hannah Ferguson is the point of contact for community engagement. Harak will be having our meeting there today from 3 to 5, and we're excited about being set up in a new engagement room. And for the past 10 days, I've really been impressed with, I've been impressed with 99 Plus Fund Management all the way through this, but in the last 10 days, I've seen a marked improvement in just the folks there. And one of the more common complaints I'm getting these days is that they're getting too much sleep and are getting bored. So bringing the engagement center online is a huge deal. Hannah Ferguson will be the point of contact for that. We'll have contact for both her and Cesar Ramirez, the director, in the Harak update. I think we'll follow today's meeting. Or if anybody wants that info, I can get it as well. And it's just really been positive down there. So appreciate all the hard work and the updates. Thank you.
Thank you for participating. Would any other members of the public like to participate? If you're on the phone, it's *6 to unmute. All right, not hearing anyone. Then I will go ahead and move on to committee discussion. Is there any final comments from members before we adjourn? All right, not hearing anything, then I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned. We will see you all in the new year for this committee.
Thanks, Felix.